This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
There's a Mishnah in Pirkei Avos where the Mishnah tells us, a famous Chazal, Hamalbim b'nei chavei b'rabim, if a person embarrasses somebody else in public, ein lo chelek ba'olam haba. A person has the insensitivity of embarrassing somebody, you lose your chelek, your portion in the world to come. Says Rabbeinu Yoina, unbelievable Rabbeinu Yoina. Rabbeinu Yoina says that in Shabbos, we all are familiar with the idea of an Av and a Tolda. There's the Av Malacha on Shabbos, which was, as the Kesef Mishnah learns, was the most comparable to that which the Mishnah was done itself, that which was performed in the Mishnah, in the Mishkan, that was the Av. And then you have the Tolda. The Tolda was the offspring, so to speak, the branches, that which is similar to that which was performed in the Mishkan, but as we know, and Rabbeinu Yoina points out, is as severe as the Av Malacha. On Shabbos, practically speaking, there's no nafkamina whether it's an Av or a Tolda. Practically speaking, B'zman Hazeh. You're over in a Daraisa, both of them. Says Rabbeinu Yoina, just like there's an Av and there's a Tolda to Shabbos, there's an Av and there's a Tolda to the Gimel Aveiros Chamuros. The Gimel Aveiros Chamuros, as we know, Gil Arayis, Shvichas Domim, Avodah Zorah, says Rabbeinu Yoina, those are the Ovos. The Ovos is Gil Arayis, the Ovos is Shvichas Domim, Avodah Zorah, that's the Av. What's the Tolda? So famously, and this is how the Rabbeinu Yoina is bringing it over here, the Rabbeinu Yoina says that the Tolda of Gil Arayis, as is famous, is embarrassing somebody. You cause them to go white, you have done something as similar to Shvichas Domim. Anything similar to Shvichas Domim, that's the Tolda. Explains Rabbeinu Yoina, so what's the Tolda of Gilui Arayis? The Av is the act itself. What's the Tolda? Says Rabbeinu Yoina, HaMistakel Oy Ledaber Yahoreg V'al Yava. That's the psak of Rabbeinu Yoina Halacha L'Maisa, one of our big Rishonim. If a person, again, HaMistakel Oy Ledaber Yahoreg V'al Yava, says Rabbeinu Yoina, there is no difference if you do the Meiser itself, or you just look. It's the same thing. One is an Av, and one is a Tolda. On Shabbos, there's no difference if you Machal Shabbos, again, practically speaking, between the Av and the Tolda. Says Rabbeinu Yoina, HaMistakel Ba'arayis, if a person is looking at that which he shouldn't be looking at, that's the Tolda of Arayis itself, of the act of Gil Arayis. An amazing thing. There's an amazing Gemara. The Gemara in Sanhedrin Ayin Hey tells us a Gavaldiga Maisa, which we're not going to go through the entire Maisa because not all of it is applicable to us at this moment of time. But just for the idea, the Gemara brings a Maisa over there of somebody that happened to see a woman. And as the Gemara relates, this person, this man, saw this woman and fell in love with her to a degree, the Gemara tells us, became sick. He actually became a choyle nefesh. He was so much in love with this woman, he was going to become sick. He went to the doctor. What do I do? The doctor said there is only one Eitzah. Gemara, I'm just reading word for word, command of the Gemara. The doctor told him there is only one Eitzah, and that Eitzah is you have to have relations with her. You have to be together with her. That is the only Eitzah, it's Pikuach Nefesh. So he was a good firm rabbi, a good firm Jew. He calls up his rabbi, I just have a very small shaila, Rabbi, for you. Just one of the, you get those calls on an Erev Shabbos, mamash, a couple of minutes for Adlakas and Neves. Rabbi, just a very quick, small shaila, and then he explains how his entire business is working on Shabbos with internet sites and all sorts of interest rates and everything. I'm like, you have to think about this 2 minutes before Shabbos. Anyways, the guy goes to his rabbi, and he says, what do I do? Very small shaila. My doctor told me that if I'm not together with this woman, I'm going to die. Can I? He said, absolutely not. Yareg Val Yava. Nothing you can do about it. It's Arayis. Yareg Val Yava. Posh. That means a double posh ad moed. Okay, so going back to the doctor. And he goes back to the doctor and says, what do I do? Okay. So the doctor says, you know what? Again, Rabbi said, I'm reading with the Gemara. Look it up. Ein Hein in the Gemara in Sanhedrin. She says, what do I do? The doctor says, okay. She should stand in front of you without any clothes on. Look, and that will probably give you the hana that you need, and therefore you'll be able to live. Otherwise, pekuach nefesh. Goes to the rabbi, what do I do? The rabbi says, I'm sorry, Yareg Val Yava. Nothing, you're going to kill yourself. before you look at that woman without any clothes on. He goes back to the doctor. So what do I do now? So the doctor says, all right, she should speak to you from behind the wall. There's a big wall there, one of Trump's walls. That wall over there. From the other side of that wall, she should speak to you. And that maybe will, sort of suppress the taiva. He went back to the doctor, went back to the Rov. The doctor said, Yoreg Val Yava. Why? Rabbeinu Yoina. Rabbeinu Yoina teaches us, again, what we said last week, from the Rambam. We look at it as just such a small, easy thing, big deal. I just looked. Come on, Rabbi. Being so machmir for. And yet the Rabbeinu Yoina is paskening halacha l'maisa. Take a gun to your head and kill yourself before you look at this woman, before you even speak. That's what the Rambam says. And that's what Rabbeinu Yoina is telling us, and that's what the Gemara is telling us over here. We know the chinuch, mitzvah Shin Pei Zayin, brings down that the shoyrish of this mitzvah, says the chinuch an amazing thing. The chinuch, again, mitzvah Shin Pei Zayin, says that the shoyrish, the root of this mitzvah is hidden. Why? Because if a person is careful from this, he'll be prevented from doing any other aveira. Says the chinuch, this right here, the inyan of arayas, istaklos, looking, shmiras einayim, is the pesach, it's the entrance, it's the way, it's the shar, it's the gate that will will enable you to prevent yourself from doing any other aveiras as well. Which is an amazing thing. There's a Mordecai Rambam. The Rambam, at the end of Perek, Chav Beis and Hilchos Surah Bia, says the Rambam, Ein lecha dover b'chol haTorah kula shu kosher l'rov ha'am, elo lifrosh min ha'arayos. Rambam. Says the Rambam, there is nothing in the entire Torah that is as difficult, as hard, as the Rambam says, lifrosh min ha'arayos. That's the lashon of the Rambam. Asks the Prisha, Eben Ezer Simon Chavei, I don't understand Pshat in the Rambam. There's a stira. Says the Prisha. We know there's another Rambam, right at the end of the same Perek, where the Rambam writes, Betzim it's a Chazal, Ruban begezel, most people steal. Most people. Or miutim by rayas. Some people involved in Inyan rayas. 1 second, the Rambam himself said, there is nothing as hard to distance yourself from a rayas. But yet the Rambam himself said, most people steal. When it comes to a rayas, only some people. Answers the Prisha Pshat, in the Stira, the Stira in the Rambam. Says the Pshira, you have to understand why. For those people that use and ignite the Yetzer Hara in this Inyan, it's one of the hardest things to pull away from. It's one of the hardest things to distance yourself. Once you're in it, once you've ignited the flame, and the Yetzer Hara is strong, says the Rambam, and so the Prisha learns, it's so difficult. It's not impossible, but it's very difficult. Masha'inkin, a person that doesn't ignite the fire, doesn't ignite the Yetzer Hara, so for him, he'll be in the category of miyut. Every so often, maybe. But most people not. Somebody asked once, I wrote a letter to Rav Osnat Zatzal, said, I don't understand. Chazal tell us that Torah Tavlin, Torah is the remedy for any Yetzer Hara, Barasi Yetzer Hara, Barasi Torah Tavlin, the Gemara. What's the pshat? I have a problem in Arayas. He wrote to Rav Osnat, I have a problem with Arayas. I learn, and it's not going away. What's pshat in Chazal? So Rav Osnat said, Avada. Chazal wasn't talking to a person that's busy igniting the flame, that's constantly oisik in the inyan of Arayas. All the Torah you can learn is not going to help you. It's for a person that's trying to distance himself, a person that's trying to stay away from. Moshe Aaron Stern Zatzal wrote that it's the hardest part of Shmiras Einayim is the beginning. That first inner struggle, that moment that the Yetzer Hara comes to you and says, just one tiny look. That's all it is. That moment is the big struggle. After that, everything gets much easier. And you'll speak to people, as I have done, who have worked on this, and they're all masculine. The beginning is a nightmare. It's hard. It's hard to be Polish. But once you start, like the Rambam says, it gets a lot easier afterwards. There's a Gemara in Yuma, in Daladam and Beis, where the Gemara tells us, Toiv Marei Naim Posek Mahalach Nefesh. Better is the sight of the eyes more than the walking of the soul. What's the pshat? Toiv Marei Naim Mahalach Nefesh. Better is the sight of the eyes than the walking of the soul. Omar Reish Lakish. Again, Gemara, Yuma and Daladam and Beis. Omar Reish Lakish, from here we see that that a blind person never gets satisfied. Right? There's also familiar with the Gemara in Shabbos, Rashi, by the Indian of Adlokas Haneris, the person doesn't see his food, you generally don't get satisfied. Says the Gemara, continues, Omer Reish Lakish, weiter, another pshat. Good is the sight of the eye looking at a woman more than the Maisa itself. An amazing thing. Chazal, Rabbi say. Reish Lakish. The Gemara in Yoma. Reish Lakish is telling us an amazing thing. Ask Rav Wolbe Zatzal, what's pshat in the Gemara? You're telling me looking at something is more than the Maisa itself? That doesn't make sense. You're just looking. That's the Maisa. What's pshat? So Rav Wolbe explains very poshut that the imagination that we have inside us builds everything up to be a lot more than it is. When you're looking at something, and that's what the entertainment industry is all about, they're just showing us just enough to get us tempted. Just enough to build our imagination up that all of a sudden in our minds we come up with conjuring all these amazing things that could have been happening, but we never saw it. Because that's what the imagination does. Whereas the Meiser is the Meiser and it's finished, it's over. Said Rav Wolbe, that's the pshat in Chazal. Chazal are telling us, Toiv Marinaim Be'isha, Yosem Meguva Shal Isa Shitas Reish Lakish, that Lemaisa, that more satisfaction the person gets just by looking than the Meiser itself. Because that's what it all is. It's just a look. I said recently, imagine you're walking past a building site, and you've got Goyish builders there. I haven't got much to do with the day apart from a couple of building bricks here and there. A woman walks past. Maybe her skirt's a little bit too high, maybe there's a slit in the back, whatever. She's completely wearing clothes, but maybe it's a little bit more revealed than the norm. And she's walking past the building site. It's amazing. Every builder is watching as she walks past. It's just like following her. And you're like, what are you looking at? She walked past you. How'd she walk? She has legs. Yes, she has legs. That's what she did to walk past. She walked past with legs. But that's what they're doing. Because the imagination gets in you and starts to... I asked Bachrim. Not Bachrim here. Bachrim in other places. What's more exciting? A movie or a book? It's like we're talking about different types of things, obviously. A movie or a book? That's not so clean. And every guy said the same thing. I've done this for years. Every guy said the same thing. A book for sure. But the movie's a picture. It's in front of you. I can see it. No. The book makes the imagination so much more gishmak. Rabbi say it's chazal. It's a chazal. It's unbelievable. Listen to this from Nosson Adler. Unbelievable. There's a Gemara in Avodah Zarah. You do what? The Gemara in Avodah Zarah tells us like this. When a person is a choyle, Rachman litzlan, a person is a choyle, a bad choyle. Says the Gemara, the Malach HaMoves is standing above him. We're talking about right before Yetzias HaNefesh. He's about to leave the world. The Malach HaMoves is on top of him. Says Chazal, the Malach HaMoves is Molei Einayim. The Malach HaMoves is full of eyes. Amazing. Thousands of eyes. Ad Kan Loshen HaGemara. The Chassam Sofer brings from his Rebbe of Nosson Adler that says pshat in the Gemara like this: when a person takes his eyes and uses them to look at something which he shouldn't be looking at, he creates that eye in the Malach HaMoves. So when that person, after 120 years, is about to leave the world, the Malach HaMoves comes down with all the eyes of all the Re'iyas Asuras that you did over your entire lifetime. Of course you could do tshuva, of course you can masakin it. But if you don't, you know what it means? People think, no, I looked. That was last week. Now it's a new week, it's a fresh start. We had a Sunday, Baruch Hashem. It's a new week, forget about it. It's not the pshat. Until you masakin it, till you do tshuva, the eyes stay there. And we already learned the Rambam last week how hard it is to do tshuva on this issa, because all it is looking. But yet Chazal tell us the eye, as we said and we will say, is the thinnest mechitza, the thinnest separation between the outside world and the neshama inside our guf. The Gemara in Kedushin, Daf Pei and Aleph, brings a raya to this. Gavaldig Amaisa. Says the Gemara, there are Tanoim that used to laugh at people that were over Aveira, people that were doing Aveiras in Yoni Arayas. Says the Gemara, the Tanoim were arguing, they were laughing at them. Tanoim, they were busy laughing. Why are they sinning? What's the big deal? Is it so bad? And they couldn't understand what the Yisr is. They couldn't understand the Taiva, the Yetzirah. And what happened was, the Sultan said to the Rabbeinu Shalom, let me test them. And Hashem said, fine, go and test them. So the Satan disguised himself as the most beautiful woman to ever walk planet Earth and went in front of these Gedolim and would try to trip them up and managed for a moment, after trying not to, they managed for a moment to trip them up and left. Asked the Ben Ish Chai, what's the pshat? The Satan had to dress up as a woman and come down to the world. I don't know, bring a woman in who's a nice woman, bring her in, figure it out. What's the Satan has to dress up like the woman? What's the pshat? Says the Ben Ish Chai, you know why? Because if they would have looked at this woman, that would have caused a connection. There would have been a shaykhs. It would have penetrated the neshama. And it was a real woman. We couldn't have that. We don't want to have that connection. Rabbi said we don't realize that by looking there's a connection that we have and it goes to the inner of our soul. There's a Moedik Chudesh HaGodus in the Maral. The Maral writes in the Dorm Daf Chofam and Aleph, Chudesh HaGodus Gavaldik. He says, what's shot in the Chazal, Kol HaTzoyvim Enoshim Sofer Boledei Aveira, says the Maral, Ki Ayira Chibo El HaIsha. When you look at a woman, there's a chibo, there's a connection. You think of a big deal, I just looked. But it goes into the neshama. It goes into the depths of the neshama. There's a Murtik at Targum Yonasan Ben Uziel, Parshas Vayechi, Perek Memtes Posek Beis, where he writes, Ma yoin hinun einoi, the Malka Meshicha, Kechamra Zakicha min lemeich me giloi aryin. Everybody with me? Says the Targum Yonasan Ben Uziel, and I explain in English, how beautiful. Again, Targum Yonasan Ben Uziel and Parshas Vayechi. How beautiful are these eyes of Melech HaMashiach, like clear wine, because they didn't look at Gilei Arayis. Moshe Shapiro writes, and he brings the words of Targum Yonasan, and he says it's Yesod Noiras. Oh, it's scary. The Targum Yonasan is telling us that when a person looks at Arayis, it's not just a Meister Istaklus, he's just looking. No. It actually, the Istaklus becomes clear in his eyes. Someone that can see that his eyes have looked at the wrong things. It's recognizable. The eyes that have benefited from looking at the wrong things are different eyes to the eyes that never benefited from. And it's a very, very scary thing indeed. The Chazal tell us in Masechtas Derech Eretz, Perek Aleph, if a person looks at the heel of a woman, Rabbi Sai, I don't have to tell you or explain it to you in any graphical terms, but the heel of a woman isn't the most attractive part of a woman's body. But yet Chazal used that specifically to tell us that if a person looks, a person's stuck at a filu at the heel of a woman, goes in a love shoe, bonim bali mumin. Rabbi say we're living in a generation where everyone's looking for good children. Everybody wants to be zoicha to have children that are Yerushalayim, Talmidei Chachamim, El Chayidin. People invest time and money, tears, tefillas in their halachic children. And here Chazal are telling us, if a person looks at that which he shouldn't, even the heel of a woman, not the most attractive part, it's Gzeir in Shamayim, he won't exactly have good children after that. It's a terrible, terrible thing. And Rabbi said we're living in a generation with fashions. Wherever you live in the world, you are not safe with the fashions. And again, it's unfortunate that people think that tznius just means it's covered. What's the problem, Rabbi? Everything's covered. We're living in a generation where everything has to be tight and everything has to be on show. The only eitzah we have is for us to walk on the street and work on it. That's the only thing. You know, it's interesting. Somebody told me that the average person looks at his phone approximately 160 times a day. Approximately 160 times a day. It's around about every 6 minutes. Right? Some people probably will beg to differ. It's not much more than 160 times a day. But it's approximately every 6 minutes. If you think about it, it's very interesting. Imagine you leave the world after, let's say, 100 years. Mitzvah Shem 120. But let's say 90, 100 years. And actually came out. And you look back. And Mitzvah Shem, you won't, obviously, with this. But you think about it. A guy could look back and say, wow, a third of my life I spent sleeping. Okay, I had to sleep in order to live. The other third of my life I spent having a relationship with a machine. That's what I did. Every 6 minutes, a third of my life I had a relationship with a machine. That's what I did. It's an unbelievable thing. A person doesn't realize it. And I've heard this before from Bachrim. Say no. When I get married, Mitzvah Hashem, don't worry, everything will be okay. Right? Wait till I get married. Rabbi, leave me alone. Come on. Let me have my years of Bachrim. I'll get married and everything will be wonderful. Rabbi say, I don't want to break the news to anyone, or those that already know this, it's obvious. Marriage doesn't solve any problems, including this one. In fact, it only makes it worse. Much worse. And as we'll explain, Be'ez Hashem, maybe we'll get a chance, maybe we won't get a chance. Rabbi say, how many people have sacrificed their life, their wife, and their family for these isurim? How many people that wanted that moment of pleasure? That's all it is that moment of pleasure, as we explained last week. And with that moment of pleasure, they've destroyed their life. And along it with their wife, with their children. How many people? I don't know if you know stories, but I know, unfortunately, too many stories of people that threw away their entire lives because of a moment of pleasure. Rabbi said, if we don't start working on it now, it's never going to become better. It's an addiction that only gets worse and worse. And the only way to work on it is to realize what it is. Rabbi said, we have to realize we have challenges. Life has with it many, many challenges. Life can be tough. And it's kind of, maybe we can compare it maybe to a football game. Person is training to go into a league of a football game. The coach, if he knows that he's good, is going to throw you a good challenge. He's going to make you work a little bit extra hard because he sees the potential. And as we can explain maybe in more detail next week. But the understanding is the coach with a capital C, the Rabbeinu Shalom, sees our potential. He sees what we're capable of. And he throws us the extra challenge every so often. There are two ways that you could deal with this challenge. You could actually take it, you can rise to the challenge, or you could just take the easy way out and give in, which is what most people like doing. People like running away from problems. People like giving in. This one drinks to get rid of his problems. This one gambles to get rid of his problems. And this one looks at that which he shouldn't to soothe himself in order that he should run away from his problems without actually doing anything about it. Chazal are telling us, no, grow up. Realize that we all have challenges, and I'll speak next week more about this inyan. But realize the only way to actually conquer it is to realize that it's a challenge that we can overcome. Let me end, Rabbi, just now with one last thing. This week in Mitzvah Hashem. The Rabbeinu Shalom gave us a set of beautiful eyes. Beautiful eyes. We can do anything with those eyes. We can learn with them. We can daven with them. We can do chesed. We can look for things to help people. We can smile at people. There's so much that we can do. The following Maisa took place in a blind center. Somebody went to go and visit, to tour a blind center. The manager of the place took him around and explained, I want to explain to you, there are three types of blind people in this center. There's people that were born blind. From the day that they were born, they were always blind. They never zoichet to see anything in the world. The second type of people that unfortunately got blind during their lifetime. And there's a third type of people that you'll see. And that is children that, right now they're healthy. But they have a disease that will happen. They will lose their eyesight. Rahman litzlan. And you'll see them as well. He says, take me to them. And he sees a whole group of children around the table. They're learning how to read Braille. The whole thing that now they can see, but they're preparing for the unfortunate future. And somebody tells them who he is, and one of the children gets up and starts crying and says the following thing. He says, did you ever see a person takes a gun to his head with his finger on the trigger? It's only a matter of time that he's going to pull the trigger. He said to the man, that's how we feel. Right now we can see, but in any moment, the trigger will be pulled, and we will no longer be able to see. The man said he left with a new appreciation of the bracha Bekeach Ivrim, of realizing the eyes. Rabbi say, I don't want to sound, we've said a lot of, so to speak, the negative side. Mitzvah Hashem, we're going to work next week and the week after, more the positive. But we have to realize the negative side of Shmir Sanan, the negative side of not looking after your eyes, the most beautiful eyes that Hashem gave you. What it is, what the connection it does to you, the inner penetrate of the neshama, it's so bad. And in Mitzvah Hashem, in coming weeks, we're going to go as well into the wonderful things and the wonderful milas that a person can accomplish by watching his eyes. Be'ez Hashem.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.